Good evening. I'm Phil Schomber, adult programmer for the Hedberg Public Library. Thanks for joining us. Wisconsin winters can be rough on our vehicles, and if we're not prepared, we can find ourselves in difficult and even dangerous situations. That's why Corey Grebner is here with us tonight. Corey is an ASC Master Technician and Automotive Instructor at Blackhawk Tech, and he's going to show us what we can do to get our vehicles ready for winter.
Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about winterization. We have a 2018 Chevrolet Silverado and a 2013 Ford C-Max that we'll be doing some winterization tips on. I'm going to show you what to do to prepare your vehicle for the winter season coming up. When thinking about winterization, the first thing I think of is coolant or antifreeze, right? So I'm going to pop the hood and I'm going to show you what to look for when we're testing antifreeze. We're going to want to go to our antifreeze reserve or coolant reservoir. I'm going to pop it. By popping it, I mean opening up the cap. And I want to make sure I do this on a cool vehicle. I don't want it on a hot vehicle. I want it nice and cool or cold. So what I do is I grab my pocket flashlight. I install it in the reservoir so I can clearly see the coolant. So as I'm looking at the coolant, I'm testing the level. I want to make sure it's full cold. If you notice, this truck is a little bit low, okay? So I'd want to get a mixture of 50% distilled water and 50% Dex Cool coolant, which goes in this vehicle. Now, they do carry a 50-50 blend at many parts stores, and that is recommended, but you want to go with the manufacturer's recommendation of coolant. They do carry multi-use coolants, and you can use that. The other thing, if you want to verify your coolant has a 50-50 mix, is you would want to grab this tool here. It's called a refractometer. You can probably buy this on Amazon for about $20 to $30. You'd put a little bit of coolant in this little sight window here, flip that down, put it to your eye, and dial it in. This would give you the specific gravity of the coolant. It would tell you, do you have 50% water, 50% coolant, or is it 100% coolant? That's how you check the coolant capacity and specific gravity of the coolant. So, I will close the coolant on this. Now, this particular vehicle does have a 5-year, 100,000 mile coolant. That's to say if nothing is contaminated in the coolant as far as oil or transmission fluid. Obviously that coolant looks pretty good. It is a 2018. It's got well under 100,000 miles, so it's not ready for its service change yet. Some Hondas and Volkswagens do go to 10 years to 15 years depending on the manufacturer. So with that being said, you want to follow the recommendations. Even though the coolant may look well, and I will show you on that C-Max, that is 7 years old, that coolant looks beautiful. However, the chemical nature of the coolant is compromised. This coolant here, even though the car has 28,000 miles on it, is still 7 years old. So, that being said, I would recommend that you take the coolant, get it flushed by a professional. And in this particular car, you're going to want to do that because it is a hybrid. So, when you come over here, here's our coolant reservoir. I shine my flashlight in, it's at the minimum for cold, which this is cold, and the coolant looks great, like I said, but it is 7 years old, so there's a lot of metal contaminants in there that we'd want to change that would give us years of maintenance-free driving after that. The other issue that we have with this hybrid is, if you notice right here, there's another coolant reservoir. This one handles the battery. So you always want to make sure that when you get this coolant flushed, you get both systems flushed, the hybrid battery as well as the internal combustion engine system. So I'm going to want to check the oil level inside the vehicle for the winterization. I'm going to grab the engine oil dipstick, I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to view it first. I want to make sure the consistency of the oil. I want to make sure it's nice and clean and not dark or any medical particles or any contamination in there. This oil looks pretty good. The other thing to keep in mind on the C-Max is the oil type. Right there it says SAE 0W20. We want to make sure that we're following the manufacturer's recommendation for 0W20. There are all kinds of different styles out there, European blends, domestic blends. We want to make sure that we're following the correct blend and the correct nature for this car. We've gone to the 2018 Chevy Silverado now, and we're going to check the oil on this particular vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the dipstick on this side of the vehicle. To pull that up, I'm going to do the same thing. Now, on this vehicle, you can tell this has had some miles on the oil change. It's still pretty clean and clear. However, it's a little bit dark. This has about 4,000 miles on the oil change, as you can see. So now I'm going to check the level. Put that in. And this one is about the same. This is about a 1/4 quart low of oil as well. So this next service for this vehicle is definitely going to be an oil change. And when I look at this oil, this one here, this is recommended Dexos version 2 0W20 oil. So that's the standard I'm going to want to follow, is the Dexos version 2 0W20 oil for this vehicle. And that should get me years down the road using that style of oil. The lubrication just doesn't end underneath the hood as far as oil and as far as the engine is concerned. I'm going to show you points on the truck or the vehicle that you're going to want to lubricate during the winter to give you a smooth winter vehicle feel. I'm going to use white lithium grease to lubricate various areas of the hood. The first area I'm going to lubricate is going to be the hinge itself, where the hood latches, right here. Yep, just like that. The next area I'm going to spray, I'm going to take this and spray a little bit there, a little bit there on my bumpers. So what that does is when the hood is closed, that'll give me years of squeak-free opening and closing of the hood, as well as the hood hinges. I'm going to want to spray this white lithium spray on the hood hinges on both sides. That does it as far as the lubrication aspect under the hood. The other thing I'm going to want to check, since this is pretty easy for me to do, I'm going to want to look at my serpentine belt. On this vehicle, it's right up on front of the engine, because this engine is longitudinal, meaning that the front of the engine is towards the front of the vehicle. On a front-wheel drive vehicle, the engine sits sideways, so we'd want to find out where the front of the vehicle is. Now, in looking at the serpentine belt, I'm going to have to hold this hose back and take a look at it. As I look at this, I don't really see any glazing, and I don't really see any cracking or checking in the belt. Some of these belts do have a tool that we'll have to put in there to test, but for us at home, I just want to take a look at it and see if it's cracked or if there's any checking or any glazing on this belt or fraying on the edges. That would signify that I need to do some kind of maintenance to the belt or the belt system. I will show you on the C-Max how difficult some of these belts are to locate. On this front-wheel drive vehicle here, this is our engine. Our transmission is typically located on the driver's side of the car. So I'm going to want to come over to the passenger side towards the front of the engine. How do I know it's the front of the engine? I have a motor mount on the top of the engine that bolts to the frame here. And when I look at this C-Max, I'm looking for the serpentine belt. This particular vehicle does not have a serpentine belt due to the fact that it is a hybrid. But if I were to choose any other vehicle over here, this Malibu, this Impala, it would be the same way. The belt would be on this side of the vehicle. I'd want to take a look at it and verify if there's any cracks, stress issues such as fraying on the sides, or any type of issues that I can visually see. Also during winterization, I'm going to want to take a look at my battery, right? So the battery provides the most amount of cranking during the winter, especially when it's cold out. On this particular vehicle, the battery is located on the passenger side of the vehicle. As you can see here, the battery has a negative terminal exposed. However, the positive terminal is not exposed. So right here, in case you have to jump this vehicle, you may have to remove this little cap here and get access to the jump post in case you have to jump this battery. Typically, batteries have a life expectancy of 5 years. So if you're getting close to 5 years, it's best to replace it. If you have a question on your battery, you can take it to your local mechanic or anywhere, and they can do a charging system as well as a voltage test on it to see if your battery is getting low. On our Ford C-Max, it's a little bit different with our battery. Here we have our jump post for the positive right here, and the negative jump post is this little metal rod right here in between all these high voltage orange wires. So we want to be careful if we're jumping this vehicle. However, this vehicle is no different than that Chevrolet pickup. This has a regular battery in the trunk, and it has a hybrid battery. The only difference is the regular battery does the same. You're probably going to want to replace that within 5 years. The hybrid battery, when it gets cold, you're going to want to make sure that you plug that in at night and charge it overnight and make sure that you have full range. Once the temperature drops below 32 degrees, your travel with your hybrid battery is reduced by 30% due to the fact that the battery doesn't have the capacity to do its job anymore due to freezing. One of the other fluids I like to check while winterizing is the brake fluid. So the brake reservoir is always typically located on the driver's side in front of the brake booster. And then we have a reservoir right here above the master cylinder. So as I look at the fluid, I can see, and it's tough to see, this is a min and a max. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take off the .3 cap. I'm going to shove my flashlight in here. I can kind of see my minimum level is above the minimum here. However, brake fluid is aniscopic, so it absorbs air and water from the atmosphere. So every 3 years, 36,000, I'm going to want to change this fluid. This truck has 42,000, and I'm pretty sure the brake fluid hasn't been changed. So for my winterization maintenance, I'm going to want to change this fluid before I go through winter. And I'm going to do a quick visual while I'm here. Look and check for any leaks or anything that I would think is suspect for winter. This particular vehicle, I don't see anything. The next thing I'm going to talk about, and the last thing under the hood I'm going to talk about, is your windshield wash fluid. So, when we look at our windshield wash fluid, I want to take a look at my reservoir. The reservoir can be typically on the driver's side or the passenger side. The cap will always have a windshield and this little kind of like umbrella spray thing on there, so you can signify this is a washer fluid. Now we have a couple of different options. I can either A, spray it on my windshield and get it out of there and fill it full of de-icer, because I do not want to mix these two. I'd want to get that old fluid out of there first and then put this de-icer in there after that. Or I can continue with the blue washer fluid. However, I want to make sure that I have a winter formula instead of a summer formula. And what I mean by that is this is good to negative 20 degrees. That's what I want to make sure. I want to make sure that my windshield wash fluid is good in winter months, especially in this Wisconsin climate. I can also add a booster to my windshield washer fluid from Prestone. This takes it an additional 20 degrees below freezing point. So I can add this and add this, I would be good to negative 40. But I would have to require the whole bottle to be added to that. So I've moved my way up to the windshield right now. I'm taking a look at this, and I want to take a look at my wiper blades for winter. I always want to change the wiper blades twice a year, once during winter, once during spring. Typically, when I do daylight savings times, when we set the clock back and spring ahead, that's when I like to change my wipers out. These were just recently done. Now, when we look at the windshield, the reason why we only want to use one formula of de-icer or windshield wash is I want this being as clear as possible when I'm going down the road. If I mix the windshield wash with the de-icer, that's going to give me a green color, and it may create smearing on here. It may not give me what I want. That's why it's important to drain out whatever fluid you have in there if you're going to a different style. Lubrication just doesn't end underneath the hood. So when I'm winterizing my vehicle, I like to come to the door of the vehicle. Now this particular vehicle has a key fob. I can unlock and lock the door as I fit. However, we do have a locked manual entry point. Many vehicles, depending on what year they are, they may have one manual entry point or they may have three. If this were a regular sedan, and let's say I have a trunk, I would want to do the same with this. You have two different options what we can do when winterizing. for the door. Either get a silicone spray lubricant or a graphite lubricant. I prefer graphite, but they were out of it at the time I went to the parts store. So I'm going to grab the silicone lubricant. I'm going to take the cap, put that over there. I'm going to grab my key. I'm going to spray this down with silicone. So you see how that's nice and covered in silicone? I'm going to insert that into my lock cylinder. I'm going to turn it forward, turn it back. I want the lock to engage and disengage. Okay, I'm also going to open the door. Going to put this key back in there a couple times. Okay, I want to do that a couple of times because what's going to happen is if I use this fob over and over, what will happen is this mechanism may rust and I may have a problem with that. Now, these handles are plastic and I've experienced this in the past where this will get below freezing, and when I go to grab the door, these plastic handles will actually rip off the door. So that's why it's important to spray some type of lubricant in here, so that way you avoid that unnecessary repair. And sometimes it can be pretty costly. Just the handle alone is about $100. So lubrication just doesn't stop at the front of the door. I'm going to move to the inside of the door. We have a couple different areas that I'd like to show you that I'd like to address for winterizing the vehicle. We have our weather stripping here. This weather stripping is a soft rubber pliable material that when the door is shut, what happens is water will get stuck in here and travel down. Well, during the winter months, what will happen is it'll freeze and stick to the metal. So what I like to do is during the weather stripping, take a silicone paste and rub that all the way around there. That way that provides a barrier. As well as the door latch mechanism, I like to take a silicone spray or motor oil and apply it to the latch. The door also has hinges and squeak points at the front of the vehicle. I like to take a little bit of motor oil and silicone spray as well as a plastic stop. I like to take some lithium spray to address that. And with this particular C-Max, we have a rear cargo slash hatch area. I'm going to want to open that, and I'm going to want to do the same thing I did to the door. There's a little bit of weather stripping here. I'm going to want to apply that silicone paste here. Now, when I look at this, I have a couple hinges right up here. I'm going to want to apply my motor oil to these hinges, as well as spray that white lithium spray in my latch like I did under the hood. So that way that will prepare this area for winterization. When I lubricate the specific components of the vehicle, it's important to know that motor oil is used for the hinges due to the fact of that's a metal joint. There's two metal joints touching. That's why I want to use motor oil. It's a little bit more friendlier. When I use a silicone spray is used for this type of rubber material when it meets the metal. I'm trying to provide a barrier there. That's what the lubrication is. So when I'm choosing these different things for winterizing my vehicle, it's important to know that for the latch, I can use motor oil if that's all I have laying around, or lithium grease. It depends on what you're trying to lube. So this is a metal surface touching a metal surface. I can use a motor oil, or I can use the lithium spray. I have a rubber slash plastic type surface touching a metal area. I'm going to want to use the silicone paste or spray for that to provide me a thin layer of barrier. If I take motor oil and I apply it to here, it's not going to do the same job. It'll leave a lot of film and residue. That's why it's important to use the correct kind of lubricant for the job that you're doing. One last key point I want to talk about during winterization is our tires. This is literally where the rubber meets the road, right? So when I look at our tires, I want to make sure that I'm checking for depth to make sure that the tread is thick enough. And it doesn't matter if I have a rear-wheel drive or four-wheel drive vehicle like this or a front-wheel drive vehicle. I always want the best tires in the rear of the vehicle. That way it helps me steer through that turn, okay? A lot of people will misconceive that, especially if you have a front-wheel drive vehicle. They'll want the best tires in the front because that applies the traction. It does, however, when we're going around a turn, I need that rear to be stable as I'm coming around that turn. If the rear is not stable, my tires are bad, that car can just fishtail around, okay? So that's the method behind that. Now, when I come to tires, it's very important to know during the winterization process, for every 10-degree temperature drop, I lose 1 psi of tire pressure. So that's why our tires are always going flat or a little bit flat during the winter months. We always want to, when it's cold, check our tire pressure and fill our tire pressure. As we go down the road, the tire heats up, the pressure inside will build 1 or 2 psi. So while I'm down here checking tire pressure, I'm going to want to remove the valve stem cap. You can either have a couple different ways to check tire pressure. This particular vehicle has TPMS sensors, and I can check on the dash to verify what my pressures are set at, or else I can have a gauge such as this, or even a mechanical gauge that I put on there. I'm going to want to go ahead and put this on here. My tires are going to want to be at 32 psi. When I looked at the gauge, it was at 32, so this tire is good. Now, where do I find the information, you're probably going to ask me, for the 32 psi? That is on the inside of the driver door. Since I'm down here, I'm going to want to put my fingers in here, and I'm going to want to rub the tire. I'm going to want to make sure that my tread is nice and even and worn evenly across, okay? I'm also going to want to check the tread depth. If I don't have a tread depth gauge, we can always go to the old-fashioned penny, right? If we put Abe Lincoln's penny in here and I tilt it so his head is down, if I can see his full head, that means it's time for new tires. If I see a little bit of his head, we're getting close to that area. I wish to take a moment and thank Ken and the team at the Milton Avenue AutoZone in Janesville for donating these supplies for winterizing your vehicle. These supplies will be donated to the Hedberg Public Library, and as a result, you'll be asked a couple of trivia questions and have the opportunity to win some of these prizes. So with winterization, it may give me a few moments to a few hours for me to get familiar with my vehicle. And that is great information to have, because I, like most of you, get in my vehicle every morning, I put the key in, and I suspect that my vehicle is going to start, right? There's no reason for it not to start, I think. So this gives me an opportunity for me to know my vehicle mechanically a little bit and be prepared for what situations may arise during winter. That's why it's important to do the winterization, so that way you get to know your vehicle and get to know what kind of possible expenses I may have going forward, as well as checking to see if it's roadworthy, right? So when I go down the road, I want to make sure that everything is good. I'm getting the best possible fuel mileage for my vehicle. I'm also being safe in my vehicle. The one thing I did express when I was talking about the tires, always check your spare tire as well during this time to make sure that's fully inflated and ready for use. I hope you guys have learned a lot from this winterization video, and I want to thank you for your participation.
Corey, thanks for all that great information. That's tips we can all use to get our vehicles ready for winter this year. I also want to thank AutoZone for their donations. And so to the viewers, be sure to look at on our Facebook page. The next few days, we'll have some trivia questions based on the tips that Corey gave us tonight. And if you correctly answer those, you'll have a chance to win some of those great prizes. So we'll see you next time.